All right, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and filminquiry.com. And it's May now, and we're starting to get into like the big summer season, and we've already had some pretty big films that have come out in the last month, as well as one that's coming out this weekend. So we got 3 films to catch up on today. Of course, we're going to be talking about the latest film coming out this weekend. That's Marvel's Thunderbolts, which is going to be in theaters this Friday. Or technically tonight with Thursday previews. You know how it works. And we're also going to be talking about the recent hit of Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which everyone has been talking about, especially since it's been a big box office boom for an R-rated horror film, which is just amazing. And we'll also be talking about a smaller film called The Wedding Banquet, which came out about a week or two ago. A little bit of a small film, but a little bit of a romantic comedy to dice things up here. All right, so before I get into this, if you like early reviews like this, like Thunderbolts is obviously an early review. It's not coming out wider until tonight and tomorrow. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to catch up on the latest films, especially when we get around award season, in which we have tons of films to cover, especially early. And if you'd like to support the show, be sure to check out my Patreon, in which I am doing a series on banned movies, which I am going to have a book out, and if you're a member on Patreon, you can get a copy of that book. Also, another reason to subscribe to is I have a new video essay coming out tomorrow, specifically on The Critical Drinker. I've been working on it for a while, so and it's pretty much done. It's a matter of just whipping up the thumbnail and just, tagging a bunch of stuff, and then it's all ready. All right, so without further ado, we'll get straight into the big film from this for this weekend, Thunderbolts. All right. Let me get my notes up here, because this is one of the rare cases where I do have to keep some of the spoilers in mind, because this is one of the without giving too much away, this is definitely one of the bigger Marvel films, which is saying something for a film where we got Fantastic Four coming out later this year, which actually looks great. So, all right, let's look at my notes up here, and we'll get straight into the review here in 3, 2, 1. So, Thunderbolts is Marvel's latest film, which is a misfit ensemble group, and it's hard to look at this film and not just see, Marvel trying to do their own version of the Suicide Squad, the version that James Gunn made. And you know what? I will say this. Yeah, Thunderbolts does borrow pretty liberally from how it tries, basically to stage Marvel's own version of the Suicide Squad. It borrows not just like the misfit concept, but it also has like similar themes, similar progression, similar reveals of like trauma dumps and stuff like that. And you know what? If you're going to steal from the best. And you know what? I think for the most part, I think Thunderbolts actually really works. It works not just as, making itself look like the Suicide Squad. It kind of like takes from that and then kind of like infuses it with a little bit more of like that classic like Avengers vibe of characters playing off each other. Because that is what I think is going to make Thunderbolts so interesting, is that it doesn't feel like the past few Marvel films where you have to have so many introductions and introduce so many characters here. There's not a lot of introductions here. These are all pretty much like supporting characters that we've all seen in one film or another, and it's very much like an Avengers film where you just get to hang out with them and watch what happens when like they start bonding with each other and start having conversations, and yeah, just being able to hang out with them, and kind of like in the similar vibe of an Avengers movie. It mostly works, and I think the glue of this film that really brings it together is just having Florence Pugh return to the role of Yelena. Last seen in Black Widow, or if you want to count the Hawkeye TV series, and she is just such a fantastic character. I mean, just even from like her opening, she opens up the film by just talking about how, she has like this deeply nihilistic sensation of finding no purpose in her life since like the death of her sister, and it's just trying to like bury herself in her work, and it's just, it's basically, leaning more towards like depression. But what I love about how they stage her is that they don't just show like, like the dark and like, staring off into nothingness, getting drunk constantly type of depression. They do highlight how it has like the good days and the bad days. And I love how Yelena as a character kind of like goes through like the motions, just like, oh, I am a little bit sad, but I'm still gonna, take the joys where I can find it here and there. And especially like her attitude where she's like running Black Ops missions and is just, she's having fun with it, but while still recognizing her internal problems. There's this very like ease to her character where it doesn't feel like she's trying too hard for jokes, or trying too hard to be dark and serious. There's a good balance there. So she's the perfect kind of leader, more or less, for like this misfit ensemble where she's thrown together with a whole bunch of either anti-heroes or washed-up heroes. So for like anti-heroes, you have like Wyatt Russell returning as U.S. agent from Falcon and Winter Soldier, who's basically the cocky, misogynist version of Captain America. Then you have, characters who have just been, hiding in the darkness, like Ava Starr, Ghost, reprised by Hannah John Kamen. And then you have just washed up heroes. Some who are, you expect them to be washed up, like with David Harbour returning to the role of Red Guardian, who just misses the glory days of being a Russian super soldier. And then you have, of course, Sebastian Stan returning to the role of Bucky Barnes, who's gone from being like a top-level Avenger to just being a politician who can't really hold his own and is just growing weary of his new position in life, which is very much a stark contrast from Captain America Brave New World. And I think that's like another big criticism I have about this film, is that it was more refreshing after seeing like the very toothless politics of Captain America Brave New World, where it wasn't quite sure what to do with its characters besides just plopping them into a conspiracy thriller. And here, it does feel like it starts off a little bit as a political conspiracy thriller, but it actually develops it into more of a character drama as it goes along, and actually becomes more psychological as it goes. And the big villain, well, there's two types of villains here. Obviously, there's the conspiring forces of Valentina de Fontaine. She actually makes a point about correcting her name in the film. Played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And she has a much bigger, like, if you were disappointed with how little of a role she had in the recent Black Panther movie, she takes center stage here. And again, I love that, because this is a character we've seen before. We don't need an introduction. We don't need to, remind everybody about where she is in the timeline here. Just, we're familiar with her. Plunk her down, give her something to do. And she does. She actually is running, these Black Ops missions that she's trying to keep hidden from the American government. And she also wants to take advantage of a test subject called Bob, who is played by Louis Pullman, who, of course, if you're familiar with the comic book lore here, he ends up becoming Sentry, and he ends up becoming too powerful that even Valentina can't control this guy. And I love the fact that, Bob is not really, he's not played up that much as like a joke character. Like, he does have his funny moments here and there, especially with such a simple name, which they do call out a few times, but he's very sympathetic when you realize that this guy had nothing left in his life, and being granted these powers gave him like a different outlook on both his self and how he presents himself to the world. Again, a much better contrast than how they deal with, people being flung into super soldier programs like in Brave New World. And I think that's the one thing I think I love most about this film thematically, is that I think the MCU kind of realizes it can't do a lot with its politics, and it starts off that way. It starts off very much a political conspiracy thriller. And then it realizes, no, we've got a good setup, but let's actually have fun with our characters. Let's kind of just throw them into different scenarios and give them different character beats and reveal more about them and get to know them and like them. Like I said, the Suicide Squad formula, but hey, if it works, it works. And it works pretty damn well here. My biggest criticism of that, though, is that once you see the parallels to the Suicide Squad, then it almost becomes like the only thing you can see, where you kind of see how this type of story compartmentalizes itself. Like, you realize, like, okay, this is the scene meant to showcase how not everyone on this team is probably going to survive. This is the scene where everyone's going to trauma dump. And this is the scene where the villain is going to have to deal with his internal struggles. And everyone kind of comes together. And you have, like, that intersectionality between individualism and collectivism that defines us. psychologically. You kind of like see all the wheels in motion here, and kind of like, okay, I see where this is going. It's not bad per se. It's just that you can kind of see what they're trying to do here. But I want to stress this. This is very much like a refreshing change of pace from the usual type of MCU films, which tend to usually compartmentalize the tone more than like the story beats. So in other words, like, here's the serious part and here's the jokes. And it feels like there's a good meshing of all that here with the way that the characters connect with each other here. In some cases, though, it is pretty overt. Like, without giving too much away here, there are moments where it's very similar to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, in which they really do need to like quickly get a backstory of trauma going, like, very quickly. And there's a very convenient way that they do this. It's not as it's not as like weird as it was in like Multiverse of Madness here. It actually kind of makes sense, and thematically it does actually build, which I do love. It always felt like the film was leading up to something else, where it's not just, okay, this happens and then this okay, this happened and then this happened. It's okay, this happens to our characters, which leads to this moment, and that leads up to this. There's an actual progression here, and I think the film kind of struggles a little bit, I think, with what type of movie it wants to be, but I think it almost kind of like embraces that uncertainty of where to go with these characters who feel that they've kind of lost purpose. Like, it has its good and bad moments where I think it's kind of recognizing how the MCU has kind of tossed aside some of these characters, and how they, and how they're just trying to find something to do. Because there are a lot of moments in this film where, it feels like a commentary on the MCU. Like, if Deadpool and Wolverine was a meta fourth wall breaking joke, this is kind of more of like an in-universe, jabbing at how you're going to treat these characters. And for retreating more into like the safer psychological element, I think it actually pulls off something pretty brilliant here. Something so brilliant, in fact, that it's almost like kind of jarring that by the time you get to the end of the film, it kind of just snaps back to remind you, like, okay, yes, this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even though we are building something here, we are also building into other films. But to have that just like arrive at like the very end was like, it was such a relief, because it always feels like certain Marvel films, there's like they pick and choose different little aspects. Okay, here's, we're going to address the Eternals here, but we may not bring it up till another film, and we're going to bring up, Wolverine, but we might not bring him up till another film. It's like, what's the point of bringing it up if you're not going to do anything with it in this film? And thankfully, Thunderbolts doesn't do that. Mostly, like I said, it doesn't need to introduce any new characters. We've seen them before. Just let us have fun with them. Just, throw them into a fun scenario and give them cool stuff to do. And they do here. I really did love the back and forth they have, especially when characters are kind of talking over each other and they have conflicting personalities. And it's just fun to watch them cavort in this type of film that, even though I don't think it has like a more centered idea of the type of superhero film it wants to be, it does have a better thematic angle of what it wants to explore with these characters. So it does put a lot of effort into making you care about this large ensemble of characters, and that is probably the most important thing you can have in a film like this, because it would be so easy for a lot of these characters to just get lost along the way and you don't really care about them that much. And to be honest, there are a few characters who don't get as much development here. Like, we do spend a lot of time with Yelena, and she is a very interesting character. I think it's worth letting her take the keys for most of this film. But it also kind of like sidelines a bit, like her relationship with Red Guardian. Like, it feels like he's mostly just there as comic relief. The same goes with Ghost. It feels like she's way more standoffish than she should be for how involved she gets with this group. But like I said, these aren't like huge hindrances. These are just kind of like more like minor annoyances that are like, I wish it could be a little bit better, because then it would actually be like a fantastic Marvel ensemble film. But for like the very attainable goals it sets out to do here, I think it gets the job done, especially for a film where it does try to have like those obligatory moments where like the team is trying to like save people save civilians from this like crumbling city, which feels like a typical superhero thing. But you know what? We spend enough time with these characters, we get to know them, we get to like them, that by the time we get to the third act and all of kind of like the Marvel hallmarks just kind of descend on this film and remind you that, oh yeah, this is going to lead into other films, it doesn't feel like, you know, like extra baggage or homework. It just feels like you got to hang out with some cool characters, see some neat action, you know, explore more of them psychologically, and see some cool fights, and then hey, you know, there might be something cooler down the line. And it doesn't feel, this doesn't feel like a bridge film. This feels like it was everything that I wanted from Captain America Brave New World, which, like, you know, because the previous Captain America films, they shook up the MCU. They said, okay, we're not going to, you know, act as a bridge. We're going to, you know, make this like a crucial point, something you have to see. And Thunderbolts does come pretty close to being just that. And I think the biggest thing is, yeah, it focuses on these characters who give pretty damn good performances and are just have great chemistry. So that's the key to it all. Yeah, Thunderbolts ends up being a lot of fun, and if you've been missing that Avengers vibe that hasn't really been present in the past two Marvel phases, this is it. This is the one to check out. So yeah, I actually really did love a lot of Thunderbolts without tempering my expectations. So Thunderbolts will be in theaters this weekend. Let's read from the chat here. Squint says, "Hey Mark, how's it going? Pretty good. Bit hectic. Work has been weird, and I've been taking on a few different jobs recently, so bit hectic. But yeah, I'm catching up with the movies here. Let's see. Suck says, I can't wait for your Critical Drinker video. That dude is one of the cringiest of the nerds, of the nerd fascists." Yeah. I should warn you though. This has been a script that I've kind of more or less been sitting on this script for about a year, just because I was debating what angle to take with it and what I wanted to say. Because I didn't just want it to be like a standard dunking video, which I will say this: if you do want some Critical Drinker dunking, there is some of that in the video, but I needed like an actual more cohesive thesis, I think, to it, and I think I got it. I think I tried to. It's very much going to be like that video I did on Mr. Enter, where I just like where I'm addressing, like, you know, this issue and, you know, holding all the accounts to fact and then just kind of moving on from there. So it's not going to be like a regular thing, if anyone's wondering. See, Scorn says, any plans on seeing the newest Nick Cage film, The Surfer? It looks wild, hopefully better than The Retirement Plan, which should have been straight to streaming. It wasn't as good as it. I actually do have a press copy of The Surfer, which I have not watched yet. So I'll probably see that tonight or tomorrow sometime. So it's in my radar. So, and I'm always up for Nick Cage films, you know. So we'll see how good it is. I mean, Nick Cage is like a mixed bag, but I think that's the fun of it. You're just like, hey, you never know. It could be docile Nick Cage, or it could be goofy as hell Nick Cage, you know. But yeah, I love Nick Cage, fantastic actor. Oh god, look, I gotta rewatch Leaving Las Vegas sometime. That's like, you know, there's a lot of great Nick Cage performances, but if you want to see him at his best, Leaving Las Vegas, that's the one. That's his best stuff. It's not his funny stuff. It's a dark ass film about an alcoholic, but it is some of his best acting. So. Yeah, it's not a fun. I think you have to temper. You have to like explain that to some people. Like, yeah, this is a Nick Cage film, but it's not a fun, over the top Nick Cage. It's not National Treasure, all right? The way Cage is serious and insane. Yep, he does it great. He's a very versatile actor. You know, I think a lot of people forget that. They remember the more ridiculous roles, and they forget that, yeah, you can actually do serious drama. He's accomplished. All right. Well, now we'll get to Sinners, which, I've been sitting on this one for, this was a lot of fun to watch this. All right. Let me get a bit more water here. All right. Oh. Okay. Here we go with Sinners in 3, 2, 1. So, ooh, flubbed my line there a little bit. Let's see. Let me redo that a second here. Sorry, I just had to change the time code on there. By the way, that happens all the time when I record my video essays, so that's that's also why they take so long. I think I recorded 3 hours of footage for the Critical Drinker video, and I only ended up using 53 of it. Zandali is probably now his rarest video out there. DVDs are only Greece imports, or $150 or VHS only. Wow. All right. Okay. Let's get to it. Sinners in 3, 2, 1. So Sinners is a new horror film from writer and director Ryan Coogler. And I think, a lot of people will probably look at this film and just say, oh, it's like an Americana period piece, Dusk from Dawn. Because like the film From Dusk Till Dawn, where it started off as a crime film, and then it quickly mutated into a vampire survival film. Because on the basic level, sure, Sinners is that. It's about a bunch of people who want to set up their own juke joint in the South, and they struggle to make it work, and then out of nowhere, in come the vampires, and then they have to survive the night as vampires try to kill everybody inside their little club. But I think that is way too much of a reduction, because the thing is, From Dusk Till Dawn, it was a fun film, but I think that subversion relied a little bit more on the surprise of it all. Within Sinners, there's so much work placed into just making a great period drama with so much going on that by the time the vampires arrive, you almost kind of forget that this is a vampire film. Because I kind of love how the marketing, tries a little bit to cover up the fact that it's a vampire film. But even if I do stress that, you tend to forget about that, just because they set up the characters so well here that it's just great to watch the drama unfold. That the vampires don't even feel like the big draw here. The vampires just feel like the sprinkles on top of this, giant ice cream sundae of a film that Coogler has made here. Just because, first off, the performances are great here. You have Michael B. Jordan playing two roles as twin brothers Smoke and Stack, who have returned to Mississippi after having gone to Chicago, and they're trying to set up their own juke joint and just, struggling to kind of reassert themselves and just, and just find something more in life, both financially and romantically, especially with them returning to their home in Mississippi and having all these ghosts from the past kind of follow them, and just realizing that they're, some things have changed. They have a lot more sway because now, they got a lot more money. They've got cool new suits. They got big business endeavors, and they can intimidate. They could, if someone's trying to even think about steal their stuff, they could just shoot them in the streets, especially for, early 1900s America. That's just the vibe that Smoke and Stack have. But I love the way that they kind of how they try to inspire this character called Preacher Boy, or Sammy, played by Miles Caton. And I kind of love how, Sammy's very impressionable. He works on a plantation, but he has big dreams of playing the guitar and, just, devoting his life to the blues, especially since his father, who is a preacher, would rather that, he just take up the profession of being a religious figure. And Sammy's like, no, I actually want to, play the guitar. And he's pretty damn good at it, as Smoke and Stack end up finding out. So they said, okay, let's hire him for the juke joint. And he's really good there. But I love the fact that as Sammy starts learning more about these two, he starts asserting himself more, and he realizes that, look, these guys might have it all going on, but they might not have the best outlook on life, and I might have to choose it myself. I might have to actually stand up to these guys. And especially there's a lot of different characters here, and there's a lot of drama going on with all of them. You have Haley Steinfeld playing Mary, who is Stack's ex-girlfriend, who they have very conflicting feelings about, because Mary initially, it seems like she could just, go off to a safe life, but she can't get Stack out of her life. She needs him in there, and Stack just won't have any of it, especially since he doesn't like the backgrounds that they come from. You have other characters here. You have a Smoke's wife, Annie, played by Wunmi Masako, and I especially loved the scene where they reunite. Like, he meets her at her like little shack of a house. And within that scene, like, there's a contemplation on the life that he left behind, the child who died too young, the conflicting nature they have on their perceptions of belief and the spiritual, and then it just dives straight into the sexual. There are so many intense moments here, and not to mention the fact that, like, the Americana, like the blues soundtrack, is constantly going throughout. There's a progressive vibe throughout of just music throughout this film. Not just like blues either. I think just like music in general, like they make it clear from the very beginning, this movie is going to be about music. Not exactly musical per se. There are musical numbers, but it's very much highlighting how, like, music can be like a supernatural force that can summon spirits and monsters. In fact, like, that's probably one of, like, the most visually stunning moments. Is there's a scene where Sammy is just playing the guitar and getting lost in the music, and you start seeing, like, music of the past and the future just bleeding all into the same scene, and music from, like, different cultures and people just all linger around, like, this juke joint as the camera follows everything that's going on here. And it's just, there's something so mesmerizing about that scene that you just want to get lost in it longer and longer. And even by the time you get the vampires that show up here, like especially like the fact that it's an Irish vampire played by Jack O'Connell, the music doesn't stop there either. Like, when his character of Remick shows up, he's playing like a little bit of like some country, bringing out the banjo, and then he'll even go into like Irish jigs. And just the moment that happens, like, there's a scene where him and all his vampire friends are dancing around and he's leading this Irish jig, and I'm just like, I don't know how anyone could hate this film. This is a vampire film where you have stomping blues and vampire Irish jigs, and there's nothing else out there like this film that to just say, like, it's like an Americana version of From Dusk Till Dawn is a huge insult to this film, especially the way that the film leans a little bit more into the thematic, because you would think, okay, so the vampires, they can't enter the juke joint. They have to find a way to kind of entice these people to come out and get the best of them. Now, there's a few ways that they can do this. Like, obviously, they threaten their families. They try to woo these people into getting so angry that they'll want to come out of the joint and assault them. And of course, it's a trap when that happens. But I do love how Remick's character stresses community more than anything. Like, he doesn't just play on, like, the obvious here. Like, that's like the cool thing about, like, the people who are stuck in this joint who have to defend themselves from vampires. They're fairly smart, and I think that's mostly because of Annie, who does believe in the supernatural and does take note of it, where she kind of, like, leads. Like, she knows all the rules of vampires before the vampires arrive. So, like, you feel a little bit more confident in her hands. But of course, things will end up going south eventually. But the fact that Remick stresses that, look, you're black people setting up a juke joint in, like, the early 1900s Mississippi. There are racists around here. They're going to come after you. Why don't you just join up with us vampires, and we'll take care of all those racists, and we'll have our own sense of community. And I think that is such a fascinating angle to appeal to for such, like, an evil force like that with vampires, because it's so easy. Like, I thought for sure there was going to be, like, more of a seduction angle, especially with how, like, hot and steamy it gets in this film. Like, there are a few sex scenes, but also just, like, sex scenes mid the heat of the South, where you see, like, the glistening sweat and just the sensation all around you of this summer in Mississippi. And just, like, I thought for sure there'd be, like, more of a romantic, especially with how Sammy starts fancying this singer of a Perline, played by Jamie Lawson, which, holy crap, her song and dance number is so damn good. I feel like I could say that for just about everyone in this film. Like all these great supporting roles too, especially Lee Jun Lee, who plays like Grace, who's this very like determined Asian American who helps out with the juke joint, but is also very emotional and very determined, and she doesn't take any guff from anybody. You have Omar Miller playing like Cornbread, who could kind of be like a forgettable role, but I do love like kind of the bite he has to his character. It feels like, like he's a big guy who you feel like if he was on the plantation, he'd just be, just kind of taking orders. But when he's around people like Smoke and Stack, just like, no, I'm going to assert myself. I'm going to stand up for myself. And then there's, last but not least, how could you forget Delroy Lindo in this film as Delta Slim, a pianist who drowns himself in drink and is just having too much fun. Delroy Lindo eats up his role. He is having too much fun. Let's put it this way. There's a scene where he has to distract some vampires, and he does it in a big way. He doesn't just have the funniest lines in this film. He kind of feels like the beating heart of the energy that keeps these characters going. And it's just every scene he's in is so much fun. And yeah, just the great drama from Michael B. Jordan, just like the innocence with Maya Katan, just the sexiness with Hailey Steinfeld and Wumi Masako and Jack O'Connell's Irish Shakes. There are so many great performances here, and they all swirl around this great story about just community and music and being tempted by evil, and it's just so intoxicating. I could not get enough of this film. And the fact that it's like this was in like IMAX too, which is like it's stunning to look at and just listen to. It's just oh god, it's that perfect melding of like a vampire horror. There are some pretty gruesome scenes in this film. Like people get set on fire, they get like their faces blown off, they get cut across the throat, all kinds of great kills. Fantastic like musical numbers, beautifully shot, just everything about this film I love so much. This was so much. Ryan Coogler really did knock this out of the park. Like I think this is definitely one of my favorite Coogler films, and definitely one of my favorite vampire films in the last few years. And I know that's a high bar to cross with, like stuff like with Nosferatu and a whole bunch of other films. But like, yeah, but Sinners is the real deal. Sinners rocked so damn hard. I cannot wait to see this film again. And I think Ryan Coogler has just done an amazing job blending vampires and music into an intoxicating Southern film. God, I love Sinners so much. You need to see this film. If you haven't seen it in the theaters yet, please go see it. I could not get enough of this film. You are going to kick yourself when you see this at home and realize that you should have seen this in the theater with the crowd, because oh my god, this was a lot of fun to watch with the crowd. I love the hell out of Sinners. So Sinners should still be playing. It was number 1 in the box office for 2 weeks in a row. See, Scorn says supernatural music. Now I'm reminded of the blues episode of Metalocalypse. Oh wow, it's been a long time since I watched Metalocalypse. Like college days. Yeah, if you have not seen Sinners yet, go see it while you still have a chance. Especially with the crowd, like, oh my god, it's doing really well for an R-rated horror film. Also, because I think, isn't it, sorry, I gotta look this up, because I'm pretty sure it was produced by, oh god, why am I blanking on his name? It's been a while since I've seen his films. Okay, it wasn't produced by him. Okay. I don't know why I was thinking it was a different producer, but yeah, it's Ryan Coogler. He's producing with Zini, I thought. I don't know, for some reason I thought it was a different producer, but now I love it even more because I thought who was I thinking of? I thought, oh god, I'm gonna feel so stupid if I don't look this up. Hang on. It's oh god, I'm terrible with names, especially when I don't see films from them for a while. It was Jordan Peele. Yeah, I thought it was produced by Jordan Peele just because it seems like his type of film that he'd want to produce, but no, it's not. I should have known better because it's not through like Monkey Paw or anything. So yeah. Scrap Metalocalypse finally got the final movie. Yeah. I'll admit this too. Like, I wasn't the biggest fan of Metalocalypse, but I thought their movie was actually pretty damn good. I thought, like, like when I watched Metalocalypse at the time, I thought it was almost kind of like a one joke type show where, like the violence was fine. I just didn't mind. I didn't like how the violence kind of became like this repetitive joke where like the band just kind of like nonchalantly kind of just like, finds their way in and out of like, like this military conspiracy trying to attack them. I felt it kind of got stale after a while, but the film actually kind of brought me back in because I was kind of thinking, okay, you know what? If this film if this show actually found some kind of finality to it, and tried to take itself in more than one direction, I think that could have worked really well, and it did for the film. And I think after the film, I was almost like inspired to go back and watch the original episodes just because, like, you know what? I kind of understand it now. At the time I didn't. I had a roommate who was really big into heavy metal, and he loved Metalocalypse when it came out. And I struggled to get into it. He loved the show so damn much, though. So I kind of like, okay, there's something here. I have to watch it because obviously he's digging on it. I thought it was just like, oh, it's heavy metal and violence, which it's fine. I have nothing against any of that. It's just, how long can you keep that up with a show, Like, there's only so many ways you can eviscerate the human body before it just loses its shock. That's kind of one of the reasons I fell off of Super Jail. Super Jail I found fun in the first season, but after the second season, it just kind of became a little bit repetitive. Like, there are only so many ways, you can turn human beings into hamburger that, gets a little dull after a while. You gotta have a little something more, All right. Our final film is The Wedding Banquet. All right, let's knock this one out of the park. All right. Here we go with The Wedding Banquet in 3, 2, 1. So, The Wedding Banquet is a romantic comedy directed by Andrew Ahn, who previously did the gay film Fire Island. Fairly good romantic comedy. This film is also a remake of a film by Ang Lee, and the premise is a little bit. It feels more akin to kind of like The Birdcage or like a sitcom plot because it's all about gay characters trying to stage a phony wedding for the benefit of both of them. So you have two couples here. The first couple is Chris and Min. Chris is played by Bowen Yang, who's a very eccentric type of gay guy. The typical type of characters that Yang usually plays. And his boyfriend is Min, played by Han Gi-chan, is an immigrant who basically wants to stay in the country, and the only way that he can do that is if he marries somebody. And he figures, okay, I'm going to marry a woman so that, my scrutinizing conservative family won't make a big deal out of it. Now, in order to make that wedding work, they tap their friends of Lee, played by Lily Gladstone, and Angela, played by Kelly Marie Tran. Both of them are trying to get pregnant. They're trying to take their relationship to that next step. But the only way they think that they can, afford the means of trying to like get their child because they want like Lee to have the baby. So, Lily Gladstone's character tries different methods, but none of them are working. And they realize, okay, we'll help out, Chris and Min for like the benefit of our own. So Angela decides to put on, the act of marrying Min, and just, they get this scheme going. But the film becomes a little bit complicated, but also a little bit more honest as it goes along with this plot, because at one point there is a pregnancy that kind of throws things a little bit off balance. But then also Min's grandmother of Ja Young, played by Yoon Yeon Jung, comes to visit and quickly realizes, okay, I see what's going on here. You're staging a phony wedding. You're really in love with this guy, but you know what? You're doing it to impress the family. You're doing it to stay in the country. So you know what? I'll go along with you. I'll help you out with this ruse. And I thought, okay, you know what? That's actually a fascinating angle. I'm curious to see where this goes. And it actually goes into some very interesting places because like there's a lot of conversations between Min and Xia Young where they actually discuss like this generational progression of marriage and how there's still like a struggle present. The way that like kind of like Xia Young admits like, oh, I wasn't really in love, but you know, marriage was just the thing you did, and it's just what you had to go through. So there's this recognition of tradition, but also great scrutiny of it, especially when they get to like the Korean kind of wedding ceremony. One of my favorite moments of this film is when they go through like this tradition where they have to like hold up these I think it's like nuts or something like that are like labeled differently, and they're saying like what. And Kelly Marie Tran's character is like, what is this part of the tradition? It means like, oh, that like what we're holding here is meant to represent the different people within our family, the different generations. They're like, oh, okay, well, I noticed they're different colors. Which colors are women and which color are men? And like Min doesn't know, so he asks like Xia Young, and she doesn't know, and everyone's asking around like. Nobody knows even the people putting on this ceremony is like, I don't know. This is just a thing we do. I don't know why we're doing it. And there's a great punchline in there too about them saying, oh, well, maybe they're all non-binary. And it's like, that is such a great punchline. And there are a lot of other cute moments like that in this film where it does make it more endearing for like the romance and the comedy, where it doesn't just kind of, you know, become like a simplistic version of like the birdcage built for a sitcom, or just like, oh, here's the antics where we have to like cover up our gayness and, you know, pretend that we're straight and have these awkward conversations. It never gets that it never quite gets that like that cringy, but it does like I think explore like some interesting angles while still finding just the right jokes along the way. Like I especially love the way that Kelly Marie Tran and Bowen Yang kind of connect with each other and have like a genuine love for each other that they start questioning at several points. I also loved a lot of like Yang's one-liners. Like he usually does pretty well with them, but he's given some really good ones here. Especially the scene where like where he realizes that Xia Young is going to be arriving soon to like look over their household. And it's like, we got to stage it so like they don't think gay people live here. So they start, you know, pulling stuff off the shelf and debating their artwork and their music and their books, and just, you know, like it's a fairly easy scene for comedy, but they progress pretty well through it. Especially with like Bowen Yang's perfect punchlines, which is like, God, why is so much of this stuff so gay? And yeah, it never feels like it's like playing it up for just simplistic punchlines. And by the time you do get to the end, of course, you know, there is like an earnest and sweet kind of revelation where, you know, people, you know, come clean about, you know, who they are and who they really want to marry. And there's some great punchlines along the way, especially when they have that classic moment where they interrupt the marriage and they think, okay, you know, well, we'll get married and we'll do it right now. It's like, no, that's not quite how it works. Like if you want to do that, you gotta go through these types of hoops, and just like the recognition of just like the absurdity of this scenario is what works best for this type of film. It's the type of film that wants to have fun with the scenario, but also wants to ground it enough so that it's believable enough that you'll care about these characters, and that, you know, you want to see what happens when, you know, Lee and Angela end up having a baby, and when Yang and Jihan can tie the knot. You want to see these characters end up together. You want them to fall in love, and it works, you know, surprisingly well, you know, especially for being like a remake of a Chinese film made by Ang Lee. It holds up pretty well, especially, you know, for shifting into like an Asian American aspect. It doesn't feel like it's just replicating the same type of story. It feels like it's actually updating it and making that kind of scenario its own, with kind of like a little bit more of its own original narrative, where you're not constantly thinking about the different types of beats that it's trying to hit with like the original film. So yeah, the Wedding Banquet ends up being a pretty fun and cute little romantic comedy with a fantastic amount of Asian leads here. So The Wedding Banquet should be playing in a few theaters. It's a much smaller film, so you're going to have to look around for this, but I highly would recommend it. Especially for seeing another film with Lily Gladstone, who you might remember from Killers of the Flower Moon, and Kelly Marie Tran, who we haven't seen in a while, but she was actually in a recent horror film this year called Control Freak. which thematically the film was just, it was one message beating itself against the wall constantly, where I don't think it did her any favors, but I think she works well enough in horror where I would like to see what she does next. I think she has to get away from Hulu. Hulu has really been striking out with a lot of their horror films. I think she needs a much better film than that. But for like this romantic comedy, she's great in it. She has so many great punchlines and an earnestness. Also, like Lily Gladstone, fantastic, like earnest, like she does pretty well in these performances where, you know, she's, you know, trying to assert herself and being a little bit of a spark of life and like the darkness. She's great there. Bowen Yang, I don't think needs any, you know, you've seen him on Saturday Night Live, seen him on Wicked, and Hongi Chan just, God, I should have brought this up in the review, but Hongi Chan really does have this 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 kind of like adorable wimpiness to him, where, you know, he just like crumbles with anxiety. Like he has to break the news that that his grandma is going to be arriving in like 40 minutes to his friends, and he just kind of has this constant tone of, "I'm sorry, please don't hate me," throughout it. And it's just like, oh, you feel so bad for this guy, and it just you want to like laugh and cry at his situation. It's so beautiful. So yeah, The Wedding Banquet, so wonderful. So there you go. We have 3 great films to check out. Let's do a great nice little review of the films that we reviewed. We reviewed Thunderbolts, Marvel's latest ensemble about misfits with a great cast of familiar characters, and it does have a lot of that familiar Avengers vibe and leans more into the psychological than the political. And for as much as it borrows from the Suicide Squad, it does a great job stealing from it, and it makes that ensemble cast work. I also reviewed Sinners, Ryan Coogler's latest vampire horror film, which mixes music with its historical period piece, and it goes into some fascinating and exciting territory. It's just musically alive and sexy and gritty and violent, and just it's a fantastic film. And then I reviewed The Wedding Banquet, which is about 2 gay couples trying to stage a phony marriage, and the performances are genuine enough, and there's some really good conversations between these characters that you really do feel for them by the end, and you care more about whether or not they'll end up together as opposed to whether or not they can pull off a sham wedding ceremony. So all the films I reviewed today were great. Just like pretty equally, why did I put on the Oscars? Pretty equally, I would say. But I would say if there's one film you have to see, it would be Sinners. See Sinners right now, because like it's probably going to get drowned out by Thunderbolts this weekend. So you can, and trust me, people are going to go see Thunderbolts. There's a lot to recommend in that film, especially if you felt like the past few Marvel films weren't ones worth seeing. This one is. Like, if you love Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers type ensembles where you know and care about the characters, it's going to be a big film. So Sinners, I would say, it's doing really good right now, so it definitely is going to stick around, but do not miss it in IMAX, because I guarantee you, IMAX is going to get taken over by Thunderbolts, and you should end up go see Sinners on the biggest screen you can with an audience. You will kick yourself if you don't see it. But if you can't get into Thunderbolts, can't get into Sinners because the screenings are all taken up, try checking out The Wedding Banquet. The really good romantic comedy, especially if you don't like horror films or superhero films. Wedding Banquet, there you go. There's a little something for everybody. So you can read reviews of all 3 films over on movieswithmark.com. And if you'd like more early reviews of stuff like Thunderbolts, be sure to like this video and subscribe so you can get more early reviews as they come out. So I will get these reviews up. I'll try to get them up tomorrow. I do want to end up getting my video essay on The Critical Drinker. That'll be up tomorrow as well. Also be sure to check out my Patreon, where I am writing books on movie history, currently writing about banned movies from across the world. So lots of stuff going on. So what do we have coming up? Well, I'll be back in 2 weeks I just got the confirmation today. I will be covering the final Mission Impossible film. So we'll be having an early review of that. So check back in 2 weeks to find out if the last time we have Tom Cruise doing crazy stunts in the Mission Impossible movies is a good one. So we'll find out then. So until next time, have a good one, everybody.